So Bev, you came from Saskatchewan, right?
Yes, from Regina.
Yes. What brought you to?
Well, you know what? I'd
Rainy
like to
Vancouver.
take the fifth on that.
That's a very good line.
My parents thought it would be a good time for me to have a time out. So off I went to York House because my aunt lived on 33rd, just off Arbutus, and we used to gallop over there to whenever we could, and my memories are wonderful. For 1 year at York House, I ended up with all of these friends. It's just
Wonderful.
amazing that we've kept up.
Why do you think
the way
that
we
is?
have.
Why?
I don't know, there was something about it. It was small, it was,
So how many were
I
in
was
your class? There were
18, isn't it?
17.
Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Bobby Pritchard, and I graduated in 1952.
Here in 1948 from Greece to live with my aunt and uncle and cousin and go to school. And they thought that York House would be a good place for us to go to school. And I didn't speak a word of English.
Ooh.
So I remember we had this meeting that I didn't have a clue what they were talking about. There was Mrs. Clark and Mrs. Gio, and I can't remember who else, if anybody else. But they thought it would be a good idea if I took a few lessons of English. So they sent me off to Miss Langridge. I think I had maybe 6 lessons. So when I got to school, first
This
day,
is in the summer,
I could say
Irene, you had the
hello. I could say, how are you? I could say, my name is Irene, and all those wonderful, interesting things, you know. But I have to tell you, I learned how to speak English pretty fast because nobody else knew how to speak Greek. So there you have it. And it was the most wonderful experience ever. I loved it.
I came in the middle of grade 4. The war was still on, 1944. And then in grade 5 I became a boarder at Christmas because my mother died.
Well, I was going to Strathcona on the island and boarding, and I announced to my mother, that's enough, I don't want to board anymore, I want to go to York House because my good friend Brooke Back goes to York House. So my mother said, oh, all right. And she put me on the lunch program, and I said, no. I said, it's all starchy and the jello bounces out of the bowl. And that's because I had the girls all bounce their knees under the table so the jello would all bounce out of the bowl. When I walk into school and I see Lena Clark's picture glaring down at me, I still get the collywobbles.
I lived 3 blocks from York House. But my parents, my mother was Catholic, my father was Anglican, so the Catholic Church had to be observed. We were going to the convent of the Sacred Heart like everybody else. We were being very, very good convent girls. Incredibly good. So I led a revolt, which is very much like me, unfortunately, and still is. So I said to my father, we are going to York House, which was 2 blocks up the street. And that's when I arrived in grade 9. And of course met Marilyn. And educationally, there were things I learned. There were things that probably I should have learned more about. But the educational system was extremely different then. There was not the creative, exploratory part of it.
I came to York House in grade 9, and I can't remember what year it was. I had spent a very rough year at the Convent of the Sacred Heart. I had been in boarding since I was 7 years old. I'd been at Naramata School for Girls for 5 years, then the convent. Then I came, thank goodness, to York House in grade 9. I thank York House for all that they did for me, and they really were happy years that I was there.
But what I want to tell you about my most important class that we took was sex education from Mrs. Clark.
You got
So
to be
I will
Do you
explain
remember?
sex education. Oh yes.
So
And
what
we,
grade
we
would
were
that
all
have been?
talking amongst each other saying, wow, sex education, oh, it's gonna be cool, man. So we go into the and Mrs. Clark says, girls, be quiet. Giggle, giggle, giggle. Girls. Now this is very important. Now you listen to me. there's two important things you have to know. One, if you give a boy an inch, he'll take a mile. And another thing is, don't you ever sit in a boy's lap. And then she said, class dismissed.
I remember when Mrs. Clark would put us all in the big foyer there in the front, and every girl who didn't have her period yet had to put her hand up. What? And you couldn't be excused from PE.
Yeah.
You see, and I remember girls like you that were older and just dreaded having to put their hand
so
up.
Why don't you tell her?
She I know,
Right, bloomer inspection to make sure we had our
yes,
bloomers
yes.
on and our undershirts.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
Should we lift your
and
skirt?
Lyle stockings.
Lyle stockings.
Everything
and
skirts down to.
Yes.
And
roll the
black
skirts.
Oxfords.
Yes, I had my moments. I was caught smoking. Mrs. Clark asked me to wash her car. I can't believe she had a car.
I think I must have the championship of demerits.
Oh,
I
my
got
goodness.
3 demerits in one period in Mrs. Boxall's class, and it was partly your fault.
Oh, okay.
Do you remember that?
You refreshed my memory.
I threw a note
Uh-huh.
to you,
Mhm.
and Mrs. Boxall said, "Did somebody just throw a note?" And I said, "Yes, I did." "Well," she said, "you have a demerit, and if you do it again, you will get 2 demerits." Well, that's a challenge, right? So I threw another note, and she said, "Did you just throw another note?" And I said, "Yes, Mrs. Boxall." And she said, "Okay, you now have 2 demerits on top of the one." The house captain was not impressed.
I guess not.
That's the trouble, it reflects back on your house. Of course, Iroquois was the best house, girl.
Absolutely.
Wow. Oh, just a minute.
Algonquins were the brains, Hurons were the athletes, and
What about
Isn't
the
that true?
Algonquins?
Here,
And I also had a brother at St. George's, so most of my mind was on his St. George's friends. It wasn't on anybody at York House, believe me.
Remember the dancing classes we had in the St. George's boys?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
And there was a boy in St. George's that came from Venezuela.
Sure.
And they made him dance with me.
Leo Amaghetti.
Yes!
Anyway,
Oh, for
he spoke
heaven's
no
sake.
English, I
Yeah, that's-
spoke no English, it was wonderful.
And I guess one of the girls who shall remain nameless brother went to St. George's. So the way we communicated as boarders, we would write notes, we would go to her bicycle, remove the bicycle handle grips, stick the note in the bicycle handle, and this young lady took them home, probably not knowing that's what
really?
we were doing. And the next day we'd all be waiting for the bike to
That's fun.
when she had gone to class with pull out the notes.
You know, Irene and I were talking in the car and about our graduation, and when we went over to your house, to your aunt's house, they'd cleared out all the furniture, and all of us in our beautiful, beautiful dresses, do you remember?
Yes.
And we did ballroom dancing,
Yeah.
right through the living room, dining room around, and we danced and danced all night long, do you remember?
So did you have escorts?
Oh,
Yes,
were dancing with
supplied by
obvious-
St. George's.
Right.
Sort of.
Mine was the best
Come
dancer.
back.
Yeah, yes, he was.
Yes, he was.
Yes, he was
Yes.
fantastic.
It happened to be because at that time I was, I think it was Brock Swanson who gave me his St. George's pin. And I put it on my York House blazer. And Mrs. Clark never said a word, and which absolutely amazed me. I think she was almost proud of the girls that had a St. George's pin on their blazer. You know?